wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. Nearly forgot to say my own name. So, welcome to Nourishing the Mother. We would love to remind you to jump on to nourishingthemother.com.au and sign up to join our tribe. There's a little button on there that just sends you through to a form for your email address and name. If you are on a phone, it's mobile optimized, but you may need to turn your phone sideways in order to view the forms. I don't think that link isn't working. Just flip your phone sideways.
And we'll get it fixed as soon as we can.
As soon as tech gets on that. And we would love you to do that because we really try to create an incredible tribe of conscious mums that really are inspiring each other to keep delving, to keep digging, to keep creating these incredible beings in this world. And we really do that through sharing experiences, sharing our lives, sharing toolkits that we've learned, and that's essentially what we email you about, as well as links each week to our podcast, blog, newsletters, whatever it is that needs a wrap up, so that you have the choice to pick and choose where you'd like to listen and dive a bit deeper. So sign up on nourishingthemother.com.au.
And following on from last week's podcast, which was all about tears as release, this week we are doing laughter as release.
So this is interesting, isn't it? Because we often forget we've got two options.
Yeah, and it can be so easy to think, that there's only one way to move through big uncomfortable feelings, but actually there's not, and that there's an enormous power and profoundness when we can really sit in a place of joy and energy and laughter and fun with our kids as a mechanism to move through big feelings.
And I've really been inspired, Bridge, actually, by how much you've embraced this as a concept and expanded your own awareness and wisdom and toolkit within this too. So I'm really, excited myself just to really reawaken this as well.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that certainly in my case, you kind of hop in and out of as the need arises for me. And I really try to be led by my kids, particularly my 4-year-old, around what's needed in a moment or what's needed in a day and what he's asking for, and almost kind of pulling me into in terms of how to use laughter. And it's interesting because it's not really like it's something that we need to design for them, but rather simply open up to it as an opportunity. Because children, they don't need any extra tools that we need to teach them. We simply just need to learn to understand their language, because their language is through play, and the way that they heal is through play and connection. And we often can regularly miss that because we're in our world of getting things done and being places and needing to kind of do things in our more controlling kind of way, whereas there's actually a way to bring laughter and fun into things to help kind of release that pressure cooker of emotion and stored feelings at the same time as get everybody's needs met.
And play, we can often find ourselves in a bit of resistance to as well. So we do want to hit on that point as well further on in the podcast. To start off with, we really just want to hit you with the basic theory of it and then kind of morph into ideas and ways and story into how you can interweave it into your own lives with your own kids. So that's kind of our plan for today's podcast, which we really hope you're going to get as much out of as you did the tears one. We had some great feedback from that.
Yeah, there was some beautiful emails we got around some big ahas, which we love, right? Because we're all in this together and we're all wonderful mirrors for each other and where our kids are at and where we're at on the journey.
Yeah, exactly. So I love what you said, Bridget, that games and play and laughter are exactly another way to release all of the pressure out of the pressure cooker that's built up, same as tears can be the release. And depending on where our child is at and what they're reflecting to us, we can actually pick and choose whether this is the time and the place for a tears release, or if there's, they're a little bit resistant or they've got some niggly kind of energetic, angry sort of emotions, that the boisterousness often is hiding hurt underneath. Same as anger can hide hurt, this kind of over-exuberance can also kind of be like that. So if your kids are feeling a bit off kilter and they're a bit kind of, I'm kind of sitting here kind of wiggling my fingers going, you know, that feeling that you get when they're a bit kind of, there's tension almost in their bodies. They're kind of wound up.
Yeah.
And they feel like this tight little coil, and you kind of feel like maybe they're ping-ponging off the walls. I kind of think this is the time when you know they really do need some release. Or maybe their behaviour has just been really irritating. Maybe they're, you know, lots of sibling rivalry like my kids, and they can flick off of each other. So they'll just nitpick all day, nitpick. And I think, we haven't got to the point of tears, but if we can get in time with some really boisterous play, that it actually allows them exactly the same opportunity in which to really get out these feelings, and we come to tenderness on the other side of that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the basics with laughter play, and that play itself, as you said, Bridge, it's a child's language. It's how they experience their world, and it's how we can also bring more laughter and joy and playfulness into our own sense of self. And into our relationships.
Yeah.
So
I love that you've made that link too, because that's a wonderful thing when we start to embody this in terms of our relationship with our children. We then begin to embody it even more with our relationship with our loved ones and our partners.
Absolutely.
Which brings a lightheartedness, which brings more of a warmth, which ultimately brings more of an invitation for sensuality too.
That's exactly right. I mean, it's part of playfulness, is part of the art of flirtation.
Yeah.
It's part of a, you know, fantastic, you know, sex life is this whole spectrum of play that often we've become so serious and mundane in our lives that it's kind of filtered everywhere. Yeah. And so this is, as much as it seems like there'd be two counterbalancing things, parenthood and sex, we can actually start to reignite and revamp those areas and aspects of ourselves. And, you know, our world is constantly a mirror. Our kids are constantly calling us into the growth. And if you've had these moments of, I really want to, I really need to, you know, do this, change this, no doubt that's a form of manifestation. You're an incredible manifesting being, and it will literally come to you in the form of your children. They will literally, is kind of hit, you know, smack bang hits you in the face, and you go, oh, right, I had been asking for that one. Yeah. And when we consciously step into these moments, that's why we say parenting is never black and white. Like, there's so many layers. It just kind of blows our minds, and we hope that you kind of get that as you're listening to our podcast along the way too, that this dynamic of mother and child is so profound. It's just the pathway to so much growth and enlightenment that,
absolutely,
you know, how could we ever devalue it? I don't know. But that's the whole point of this tribe.
Exactly.
So,
I mean, that's what's happening in the tribe, right? Is that there's an incredible, when the ahas hit, it's like, wow, like we're humbled again and again.
Yeah, exactly.
But I guess stereotypically, in terms, we're coming back to play and laughter, there's a kind of stereotype of like the dad is the fun one, right? Yeah. So mum's kind of busy during the day getting all the things done, got a zillion schedules in her head, is trying to run the home, run the kids, whatever. And the dad comes home and he's the fun one. He gets to play. Yeah. And there sometimes can be that real sense of disconnect, and sometimes in a mother, a resentment towards him coming and wrecking it all, or kind of changing the tune and you know, upping the ante. But sometimes the bigger that little button for you in terms of their behaviour, or the dad or the father figure doing that kind of dynamic, the more it's actually an invitation for you to find your own way to enter into that space. Because there actually is a way, and Jules, you talk about this quite a bit, a way to still have that busy life, to have that, you know, incredibly scheduled week, and still find the fun, still find the laughter as a way to transition, even, you know, the laughter and games as a way to get things moving, to get things done, to get the outcome you need, as opposed to needing to default perhaps to the standard parenting line of just, you know,
just do it. Nike slogan.
Yeah, you know, just get it done. I don't want to hear it. You know, you have to do what I said. You know, that kind of stuff.
I know. And we've probably all played with this in terms of maybe you've done, you know, choo-choo trains to the bathtub, or, you know, you've played the aeroplane at dinner time, or, you know, some other version of a game when you're brushing their teeth, or, you know, something like that. We've all kind of probably played with it on that level. Yeah. But I do think where we want to take this conversation is somewhere probably a little bit deeper than that, in that play, when it's really consciously thought about, can be absolutely tailored to the sweet spot of their hurt, or that border of their growth. And in that case, we can actually use it to really help them build a toolkit through that emotion and an ability to really handle themselves within that space. It's a stacking of resilience.
Yeah, and I think also some great examples of using play intentionally like that, or laughter games intentionally like that, can be for things like perhaps medical procedures or the dentist or getting in the car seat, any areas of perhaps resistance, fear or trauma for children can be really great ones to find games to work through. And I believe we touched a little bit on that in our podcast with Marianne Rose, which is specifically on attachment play, which was back at episode 42. But an example even at the moment that I'm really looking out for, because my son had a few hours in hospital last night with a bee sting and had a kind of an injured hand. And I mean, already there's been lots of tears that have kind of come out today as a result of that, and certainly he's not making the distinction, but I can see the distinction between what had gone on and what's coming up.
What do you mean by that?
There's just the irrationality in terms of the things that he's wanting and the limits that I'm setting.
No, explain it more. What do you mean?
Okay, so he's wanting, so we're outside on the trampoline and he was wanting to have the Batman show on, and the Batman show on was too late and he didn't want to wait that late, so I didn't want him to stay up late to watch it, and he did, and simply it was just me setting the limit around the no. And then him wanting, then that wasn't enough, so then he'd ask for something else, and they became more and more unreasonable and heightened in terms of the request that he was wanting. So it was basically him saying to me, I need a boundary, give me a boundary. And so I recognised that and continued to set it. And then he didn't want me to look at him, he didn't want me to be near him.
Which says what to you? Which
says to me that he actually is really craving me to be close but doesn't want to be seen. This is a classic pattern for him. He doesn't want to be seen in these big feelings, particularly as getting older, and perhaps not feeling as safe to be as emotional as he is. There's almost like a shame that's coming up a little bit for him in terms of being seen, and he immediately goes to my husband to be saved, because Marcus doesn't hold him in that as much as I do. I will really hold that limit. And so I've certainly seen that the tears come up today. But haven't had the laughter games, but I'm certainly looking for an opportunity for that if I need to, and that might be something like if he's got a really sore thumb still and he's not wanting anybody to touch it, it's a little bit of a game towards pretending to touch it but not wanting, but kind of respecting his space at the same time, and playing around no, I better not touch it. Oh, it's a bit too sore. Oh, and really seeing basically what kind of reaction I get from him. So if he starts to laugh about me not going to touch it, but attempting, hamming it up essentially, then I'll know that the laughter is actually a pathway into him releasing some of the tension around it, releasing some of the fear around the experience. So laughter as a conduit into transforming the emotional charge around a particular circumstance or a particular event in children's lives, because the idea is we've all got traumatic experiences coded in our childhood, but the wonderful thing about laughter and tears as a release is that it's actually almost like therapy for us and them in that moment. That means that they don't actually have to carry that stored trauma in their bodies as they into adulthood, and that it's just such an incredibly profound gift to them to do that. And I also think that on some level, whether we're conscious of it or not, we're also repatterning our own childhood trauma simply through leaning into the areas of pain in childhood that would naturally be easier to kind of avoid, because our own uncomfortable feelings come up too, because even if we didn't have the same experience that our child's going through, on some level we would have had a experience that was scary, terrifying, somebody didn't listen to me, all of that kind of stuff. So I love how it's just a beautiful mutual kind of healing there.
I love your game. I think, I absolutely agree that we can totally play with those edges or respecting of boundaries that they're seeking with their level of discomfort and their sensations of pain, and kind of just teasing those lines out a little bit. I also, in those situations, like to flip it around and play almost like, I guess, a bit of a power reversal there, so that I would be the patient, and I would have exactly the same symptom as they have, but I would be dying with it. You know, carry on like nobody's business. Maybe if we take your example of the thumb, you know, I don't know, I might take it one of two different ways. My thumb might all of a sudden be, you know, have a mind of its own and be, you know, running around the house on its own and it's dragging me along with it and and I'm powerless to this thumb. Or it might be that I'm hamming up how sore it is and I, you know, can't control myself and I need them to fix me and I need them to help me, but they can't come close to me and I don't know how I'm going to handle it and And they end up teaching us the toolkit because they already know what we want them to do. But there's a fear there that you've got to release first. And that's part of them learning how to handle those emotions, how to find their way through them, how to find safety that expands that boundary within those emotions. So I do think you can probably, you know, go as wild as you like. If you happen to be quite theatrical, I would be as theatrical as you can possibly be. And if that doesn't sit so comfortably with you, then just really take it back to following the laughter. And if you go, no, don't touch my thumb, and they giggle, do exactly the same thing 20 times. It doesn't matter.
As many times as it gets a laugh.
Exactly.
And you'll often find that your children probably have their own thing that they might request you to do, whether they openly ask you to play a particular game or whether it's a bit more you know, subtle. Like my son, he loves to, we have this game in the car because like often in the car we'll chat or we'll, you know, I'll listen to a podcast or we'll just listen to music, but sometimes like if he's a little bit feeling disconnected or a little bit unsettled, he'll ask for this game which we created, I don't know when it was, but it's all about like this snake. It's called Humphalumpigus Snake, and he wants, and so Humphalumpigus Snake, what happens is he has this snake bag and Hugo gets to control when he's in or out of his snake bag. And so he'll say, Humphalumpigus Snake has to come out in the car, you know, I want to see Humphalumpigus Snake. And then Humphalumpigus Snake kind of winds his snake.
So is that your hand?
It's my hand. Okay. And he kind of reaches around to the back seat and kind of grabs Hugo's legs.
Yeah.
And then Hugo gets to control how much he plays with him essentially, and then he gets to direct him. And we also play with boundaries there. So we play with no, and I also play mum and Humphalumpigus Snake, and I will play like, you know, Humphalumpigus, no, that's not okay. Hugo said no. We have to listen to his no.
So you're talking to your hand like a hand puppet. I'm talking to my hand like a hand puppet, and it's really good because it's also another way to, because we talk about like, you know, honouring your no and when listening when someone says stop, and this becomes another way again to teach that to him, you know, and to teach listening. So beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, so that's one that's kind of the common one at the moment. But I just love how kids ask for what they need. Kids know how to get their needs met. Yeah. And we either listen to the whispers, to the quiet, balanced way in which they might ask us, or we face, you know, the tirade when it comes, you know, when and there's no right or wrong, right?
No.
But they're
and you never lose an opportunity.
Exactly. But I love how when you really pay attention, you can see, wow, I can see what they need right now, and they're doing their best to get it. I just want to jump in and remind you that coming up on the 16th of October, we're kicking off our next round of the Aligned Parenting Program, which is a 2-week dive into all of the principles that we espouse around our parenting paradigm and what we're really set as an intention as mothers with our children and in our family dynamics. It's all about understanding more broadly the bigger picture that you want to bring to your family life and to perhaps what's going on for you, to wade through some of the shoulds, the experts that kind of are in your head perhaps, and really distill it all down to what's your truth in your parenting role and what do you really want to set up for yourself and for your family.
So commencing on October 16 is a 2-week program with us. You have 8 weeks for online content where you download your own toolkits each week, and we workshop you through 4 different, what are they called? Not topics?
Modules.
Modules. Thank you, Bridget. 4 modules that we've designed specific to around parenting. We hope really pulls together any sort of natural parenting, attachment and aware parenting styles that you may find yourself in. Hopefully brings in this universal principle and concepts that we talk about in parenting to balance all of that out and really find the wisdom that these little children are offering us every single day as invitations into our own growth and therefore the way we show up for ourselves and for them as parents. So we would love you to join us at Aligned Parenting, which you will find on nourishingthemother.com.au/online programs, Aligned Parenting. And we would love to have you join us for 2 intensive weeks on social media with us, and then members only access after that. So jump on.
And so play, with our kids can begin even in the first year, even in the first 6 months, right? So classically we know things like hide and seek, fun games to play with babies, but in fact peekaboo as well. Yeah. And they're actually really, really great separation games. So they're some of the first games that we can introduce with babies to help them get used to the people that they love coming and going, because that's one of the classic things that little babies struggle with and toddlers struggle with, is the idea that the person they love was actually going to come back again, not just leave for good. And so even just a simple peekaboo can be really powerful. Whatever elicits that laughter and that giggle and that release in a baby can be really powerful.
Yeah, actually we got gifted for Gwen this time around one of the what are those wind-up things too that pop out?
Like a Jack in the Box.
Oh, Jack in the Box, thank you, that's the word. We got gifted one of those, and I remember having one for my firstborn, and he used to freak the absolute bejeebers out every time it flew out. And I had this portal memory of this when I saw this Jack in the Box. It's the most beautiful Jack in the Box. And I thought, you know what, this time around I'm going to play with that. There's a time and a place to bring that in, but around this kind of startling age to actually start to play with those edges of fear, because we can talk about, it's going to come, it's coming up, I wonder how we'll get ready, we're going to get ready, are you ready? Because it's going to come up and pop, and then you're there to sit with, is it tears or is it laughter that's going to come out from that shock, and really play with those edges too. And definitely hide and seek is an absolute classic. So when they're even older kids, we're talking kinder kids, if you're having issues with leaving at daycare or kindergarten or anything like that, it starts with peekaboo as babies, and it moves into hide and seek. We're in different rooms and different spaces, and so are they. And with super young babies, it can also be you're playing peekaboo with covering your face, or your hands are over your face or whatever. And with them, it can be things like scarves and things that you're placing
that's such a fun
over their head and then pulling off. And then often it's good to have a rhythm or a song to it, so that there's a level of expectation there.
Yeah.
And that you're just playing with those edges and following the laughter. And if the laughter turns a bit hysterical, you know that it's actually a release. This is like, you know how sometimes you can laugh till you're crying. This is one of those perfect examples, and kids' laughter can become so hysterical that they can't kind of even control. Well, and that's the other thing, actually, it's probably a good time to say that, actually. We didn't say it at the start, but we have said it in other podcasts, is that laughter as a release is almost like an autonomous decision for that child. It's not something that we inflict upon them. Yeah. So it's not done through tickling. Yeah. Tickling in itself is a control mechanism. So and I'm sure you have memories of being tickled to the point of, well, even the act of tickling, your body has such involuntary movements that you can't even control. You have no control over your body and its reaction. And often tickling, if it continues, can become so intense that it's paralyzing. You literally almost freeze, and you can't even stop that person from tickling you anymore. And that can really be a huge fear / trauma / overpowered dynamic that happens in our children, and certainly even in us as adults. So we don't advocate tickling as a form of getting to laughter. Sorry, I keep hearing tears in my head. But what we're saying is you're playing with those edges. You're doing whatever it takes in their environment to elicit a natural response of laughter, and you're following that. So you repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat until that laughter has disappeared. It's almost like that bell curve of tears has sighed away. The same thing happens with laughter. It kind of builds, and then sides away, and all of a sudden that thing that you were doing is no longer funny. You kind of keep going till it gets to that point, and then you've really got there. We also play with fear. I remember doing different ones, particularly when we were dealing with maybe, I can't remember now if it might have been swimming lessons, fear of water, maybe with my firstborn. And so we used to play that the bed was an island, and the area around the bed was the sea and it had sharks in it and things like this, and we had to play with getting in the water and getting out of the water and moving through the water. And you know, sometimes I would get like a blue piece of fabric or whatever and put it on the ground, and we would play with toys around, you know, getting in the water, getting out of the water, that there might be predators in the water, and you know, playing with all these edges around what their actual fear is. I know even when he was super young in prep and grade 1 and he would have playtime issues, we'd get out the doll's house and I would set up the playtime as if, well, here's Heath and here's your friend Xavier and here's da-da-da-da, and I would just follow his lead and role play. And we'd do this, you know, we have like a stop, rewind, like a video almost kind of, okay, we're going to stop and rewind and do it again. And, you know, if I couldn't work out exactly what had happened at the playtime, I would keep offering almost different suggestions until I found the one that had actually played out for him. And then he has the opportunity to really change how that happened for him. And this is the thing with memory, right? Is that we have emotion based on memory, based on our perception of a moment. It's never the actual reality, right? And we can actually scratch a memory. That's how we say rose-coloured glasses, right? Because we can actually, like a record, we can scratch that memory and it doesn't play exactly the same way.
That's why it's so powerful to do this kind of thing.
Exactly, that's my point. We can literally rewrite in terms of their emotional patterning what happened and how they experienced that, and therefore how they remember that.
And how they use it, how they use that experience.
Yeah, the meaning they attach to that experience.
What's really sitting with me at the moment is I'm thinking about perhaps the mums who are listening and who are uncomfortable with how to invite play or how to be okay with play and laughter, because I'm already thinking about like Sylvie often at bedtime she'll initiate peekaboo at bedtime, which is really cute. And
that's that whole nighttime saying goodbye to mum thing.
That's right. You know, but I felt at one point me going, no, it's not playtime, it's bedtime. I felt myself say that once.
But was that because you were kind of peaking out by that point?
Yeah, it was also
it was like a tank full empty kind of arrangement. Yeah.
But I also thought, wow, it's interesting, isn't it? Because she's actually asking for exactly what she needs to be able to settle herself enough for sleep. But sometimes we don't always meet our kids where they are with, you know, or in a way that they're asking us to step up, and we can't always. That's the reality. But it is interesting to see where our own resistant points are and why they come up when they do, and perhaps what is our own story around play. Is play not safe, not fun, boring? You know, there's better things to do. It's too indulgent. Like, what are your own beliefs around laughter and play with your kids that either that make it okay or not okay? Because depending on perhaps your own story of childhood, that it might not be. Sometimes it might not be safe for you. And it's always important to check in with yourself around what your own story is with some of these games and some of the ways in which our children are asking us to show up.
Well, what the belief is that's underlying your resistance to play.
Yeah.
Why don't I want to do that right now? And, you know, often we can have these sentences that run through our head that prevent us from acting, but they're not actually based on anything. But unless we self-check in those moments, we just roll with them.
Yeah, and it becomes really our kind of default.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It can also become a source of perhaps conflict or resistance or disconnection in our relationships with our kids, because if that's what we kind of keep, that track we keep going back to, it becomes this sort of gulf, you know, in terms of our environment with them, which I love the opportunity to then consciously look at and ask why is that like that.
And I love that you brought up bedtime, because I actually think games I'm not going to say could be part of bedtime routines.
Yeah.
So we've talked about this probably many times before. But as it's a masterclass, we're going back here, is that often we want to get to bedtime and we've spent maybe 2 hours, you know, winding them down for bedtime, thinking we need to be calm to get into bed. But often if you've got these feelings kind of running through your body, you know what it's like when your brain doesn't switch off and you can't get to sleep. It's no different for kids, particularly if their bodies are full of feelings that are just kind of pent up and have nowhere to go, that is kind of creating havoc on the inside. Games can be a fantastic way to, and you can put a time limit on it, right? So here's your loving limit as well. Is yes, we can play, and we're going to play hard and fast and loud, and we're going to do it for 10 minutes. And then it's over. But your 10 minutes needs to fit in, not so 10 minutes, right, we're off to bed, because when that doesn't happen, then it clicks you into, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. Your 10 minutes probably needs to be, I know that I've got 20 minutes of leeway after that before I expect them in bed. To give yourself the break. Well, I know I'm saying that because that's certainly something I struggle with. that I have I'm pretty scheduled. And same thing with bedtime, because I'm looking forward to that clock off. I'm looking forward to that time of, this is my time now, and I work or I rest or I connect with my husband, and I need that time, and I'm to some extent hanging out for it.
Yeah.
So if whatever's happened and my kids are now encroaching on my time, I get like, that's enough.
Yeah. We're done here.
Yeah. And there's nothing left. There's no tolerance. There's nothing. And so to avoid that boundary that I know I get to, I make sure that I've organised that time before bed enough that play allows me at least 20 minutes before I need them in bed asleep.
Yeah.
Because then it relaxes me enough to do that. Because often what happens is play, if the laughter hasn't had a complete release, it will click them into the feeling of connection. And the feeling of connection is incredibly powerful. And you know this because you have had conversations with friends or loved ones before where you've been completely fine and not on any sort of emotional wavelength, and then all of a sudden that person looks at you a certain way or holds your space in a certain manner or says just one word, and all of a sudden it's hit you to that sore spot you've been kind of ignoring all day, and you're a blubbering mess. This is the art of connection. This is the art of holding space. And play can do this. So play can form enough connection that there's almost like a trusted love bomb, and the kids are tender and open. And if they're tender and open, we're going to probably meet those things that they wanted to tell us about all day and we haven't had the space to hear.
Yeah.
So you need to allow yourself a good 20 minutes afterwards. If you've played and you've got it done in that 10 minutes and there's nothing left at the other end, fantastic. You've got an early night or you've got extended storybook time.
Yeah.
But, you really need to give yourself that time afterwards, I think, to expect and anticipate tears, or that they're going, no, one more, I want it again, another one, which is just... don't let it stop because I'm on this edge. I'm on this edge of release and I don't really want to because I'm holding it all in. So one more, another one. And we go, no, it's not happening. And all of a sudden it's like, crash, which is what we actually are doing this for anyway.
And that's the beauty of it too, because it really takes you and them to that incredible expansive place of connection that tears allow, but it's one of those things, as we touched on in last week's masterclass, of getting okay and seeing the benefit of that space that we find ourselves in with our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm all for roughhousing and hamming it up and getting wild and crazy before bed, because I personally think kids settle way better. I
totally agree, and it's funny because particularly if you come from like a natural parenting or attachment parenting or any kind of sleep settling approach.
Anywhere.
Which is all about like dim the lights, calm voices, blah, blah, blah. That stuff screwed me. It wasn't until I actually found that, no, I need the pathway particularly for Hugo. I haven't noticed as much with Sylvie yet, but particularly with Hugo, was we needed to have the wrestles, and he asks for it. And he asks for it from me now. Like, he says, Mum, can we have wrestles right now? And that's his way of going, I've got some stuff I need to shift. Can we do that? And like it's profound because they get rid of all of the tension from the day through that really rough play. I love it.
And don't think that rough play is inherently for boys. I think it is just as much for girls as well, and we don't need to change how we play or the loudness or the roughness. They've got just as many feelings of equal strength, and they have just as much boisterous energy. It's just a matter of how they actually channel that. So, I'm all for, yes, let's all do some play before bedtime if we've got time for it.
I think an example of how powerful play is in terms of its healing capacity for children, and it was a story that I read about September 11 and the number of children in kindergartens in that whole New York affected region who were actually using like blocks and like Legos and kind of basically any kind of building blocks that they could get their hands on to actually reenact what they were seeing through the news. Like they were building towers and actually crashing towers down and kind of laughing through it as kids playing. And there were some adults, accounts of adults who were traumatized by watching the children play like that, but the teachers and the psychologists actually had to say, no, we need to allow the children to do this because this is their way of healing. This is actually something that's really healthy for them. And it's similar to even the way that we need to allow our children, older kids, when a sibling comes along, to feel angry or to want to role play, like sending the baby back to hospital, or perhaps even like dunking the baby in the water. Things that might push our buttons and make us uncomfortable as adults are actually the very things that children need to do to shift.
Or to process those feelings, to work out what they mean for them, to find their way through in their own kind of bubble and without the scrutiny of anyone around them, to work out how they feel about that situation and find their way through it. I actually also think you see this, I mean, you see it a lot with boys in terms of, building things, and probably it's more physical.
Yeah.
With girls, I think you'll notice quite young that they're much more verbal. And so you're looking at the same dynamic, but on a micro scale. This is why girls love play with dolls so much, with figurines, and why they role play different voices and different tones, and someone will be mum and someone will be dad. And I mean, they're role playing everyone.
Yeah.
And in that situation, they get to really play out who's saying what to who and how that person's feeling and how that person reacts to that other one. I actually think this is genius. I know I'm only saying it because as you were saying that story, I was reminded of my third child, who's now just turned 4, and she is an absolute master at it. She will play continuously for hours in these little bubbles of communities, playing out all these different scenes. And so often, if I just take time to really listen to her words, there's so much of me that's coming out.
Right.
So she literally verbatim will say things that I say. And then she has the opportunity to be the child who, wants to revolt against that, or who she's the mum telling the child what to do, or, and I see her really workshopping all of the different dynamics that essentially exist within our family.
Yeah.
But she has this opportunity to work them out on her own and role play power and powerless.
I love it.
In that whole space. Like, it's pretty amazing when you stop and take 5 seconds. It's not just Barbies.
No.
It's not just, dragons and princesses. No. There's a whole lot more that they're actually doing there.
And we've talked about this before in terms of boys and superheroes.
Yeah.
And how that's playing and trying on the masculine and trying on what it means to be a man. And really explore that kind of energy and dominance and all of those kinds of new aspects of self that they're journeying through. Like, there is an incredible richness to play that I think so often as adults we don't.
We skim over.
We skim over, because of all of our stuff. But I think, wow, like, there's just so, particularly if, you are spending a lot of time with children, if your children are young and you're spending a lot of time at home with them, there's a way to actually really awaken and enliven that time you spend with them when you start to see just how amazing their play is. And you realise how fortunate we are to even be privy to it, because it's an
experience of an internal world, isn't it? Which as adults you don't get to see because we journal or we keep it to ourselves, or whatever, whereas for kids it's this blossoming of what's on the inside that has this outward experience. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And when you're entering the space in that way, I think you can bring a sense of reverence to what this play environment actually offers them.
Yeah.
And same for, this concept of letting them have time to play on their own as well. They may not even want you in there. And I think I touched on this before that, one of the biggest problems I had with Steiner way back when I was there with my first child was that you weren't allowed, it was a rule, you weren't allowed to enter children's play.
Okay.
So when you were a parent helper in the kinder, your job was to tidy up, and essentially you kind of role-playing a house. So your mum cleaning, folding, putting things away, cooking in the kitchen for their snack or whatever, and you don't engage really with the children. And I had really big feelings about that back then. And since I've evolved and really witnessed the, I'm going to say grandeur, or the magnificence of children's play and internal worlds in play, the more I understand the reverence of that.
Yeah.
That, I was watching my mum with my, with Lola this is several weeks ago now, but she was trying to, and actually she has still this young babysitter who comes over and looks after her for 2 hours once a week after school when I get stuff done. And I can see that she wants to take over the play or be in charge of the play. And same as my mum's trying to inject herself in the play or direct the story. And they think they're playing with them. But what's happening is you're changing the internal world. You're trying to power over their internal experience of a game. And when you look at it that way, I can completely understand why then my daughter's going, stop doing that. Because this is not, she set up this play that you're now trying to control. And that's not what this is about.
I so love that, because in this kind of mirrors a lot of what we talk about in aligned parenting, which is this whole idea of children setting you up to feel what they feel. So even in play, children are setting you up to feel exactly what's going on in their internal world. And you are like a pawn in their story, essentially. And so that because sometimes, particularly if I'm one of those mums who sometimes resist play, like, resist getting down.
Don't we all, though?
Yeah. But then I think, wow, wouldn't it be cool to actually flip that a bit and go, God, like, what an invitation into their world. Like, if I'm actually able to sit here and just simply be who he wants me to be in this play, I don't have to ask him how his day was. I don't have to, get my adult way of getting information. I can simply just allow myself to be set up in this play and be directed by him, and I'm getting an immediate look into his world.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
It's pretty amazing, particularly when they're not as verbal as older kids are, when we can really understand what's happening for them. It's an absolute way to decode what's happening for them now. So we invite you into play. We invite you to open up play and playfulness within yourself, and to look at the beliefs and the resistance that are underlying why perhaps you don't want to.
Yeah.
And perhaps see how, by this practice of just expanding, small millimeters at a time of play within your world, creates more playfulness around your whole world, not just this one particular area. So we invite you to play.
Yeah.
And we would also love you to rate us on iTunes, or spend 5 seconds and give us a review on Facebook.
You know what? I hopped on iTunes because we had...
Can you work out how to do it?
Oh, you and I like ask people to do this all the time. I thought, you know what, we should actually go and see who's done this. And I went and looked the other day, and I was so blown away. There are so many ratings on there, and they're so lovely. So for all the people who have done that,
really?
Thank you. They're really nice.
It kind of went in my 2 heart box. I'm like, I can't understand what I'm doing.
Yeah. So I went and had a look. So thanks everyone, because they're really nice. But of course, we would love more. So if you haven't yet, we'd love it.
And please, if there's any podcasts that really resonate with you, please share and link your friends in, so that we can really build this conscious tribe. Because I think the more we have these incredible souls that we're raising, the more this whole gig of this world and humanity is going to expand and change.
It's big stuff.
And just honouring who we are as mothers and this journey of motherhood, it's big stuff.
Yeah.
So please join us on Facebook and Instagram on Nourishing the Mother. And to connect with you, Bridge,
It's suburbansandcastles.com. And you, Jules?
Is thepleasurenutritionist.com. And just a reminder to jump onto nourishingthemother.com.au/online programs, aligned parenting, and jump in with us on October 16 for 2 weeks to intensively reinvigorate your parenthood.
Yes.
And we'll see you next week.
We will.
When we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey we nearly forgot.
We did.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.